everyone, it's Keely here from Soy and Shea, and thank you so much for joining me for another behind the scenes video. As you saw in the picture, we're going to be making some coconuts today using some soap dough. Now I've already done lots of videos showing how I make my soap dough, so I'm going to skip that process and get straight into making the coconuts. What I've done just on the top of my board here, I've just put some cornstarch, and I'm just going to use a little bit of that just to stop the soap dough from sticking to my hands. And I have here just a plain uncoloured piece of soap dough, so I didn't even put any titanium dioxide in. It's just the natural colour of the soap. When I don't use that titanium dioxide, it kind of almost gets this translucent look to it, even though it's still opaque. It has that real sort of glossy sheen to it, whereas if I put the titanium dioxide in, you get that more solid colour about it. What I've done here is just taken a small piece off here, and I'm going to roll myself just a couple of little balls that are about 1 inch in size. So I'm going to do a few of those to start with, and then we'll move on to the next step. So I've got a few of those little white balls now rolled out, and what I'm going to do is take my knife and chop these in half. Now what I have discovered is if I use the end of my, like the butt end of the knife, I tend to find I squish my shapes as I'm cutting them. So I'm just going to use the tip of them, which puts a lot less pressure when I'm actually cutting these in half. And I'm just going to dab the top of it into that cornstarch just to stop the soap from sticking to my knife. And then I'm just going to very simply cut all of these in half. Okay, so now that those are all cut in half, I'm going to take one of these halves and just sit it into the palm of my hand. And I have this tool here which has got a large ball on the end. I'm going to just hold it into the middle, and I'm going to start to rock that half of the ball around. So what it eventually does is we'll get a hole into the middle, and it will kind of push this out, make it a little bit bigger, but it will also keep it in that sort of half circle shape with that hole. So when you look at a coconut, you often get that hollow in the middle and then the white flesh inside the shell. So I'm pretty happy with how that's come up. I'm not too bothered if the edges of this is a bit ragged, because if you've ever cracked your own coconuts, you know that you will never get a perfect cut. So we can always play around with it once we start to really put these together. So I'm going to do that with all of my pieces. So again, I'm just going to take this one half with the large ball tool, and I'm just going to start rolling it around in the palm of my hand. I'm slightly cupping my hand just to try and get that sort of roundish shape to it so it doesn't go flat. And I'm being careful that I'm not pushing it through the bottom, and but I'm still actually pushing the soap away from the edges so that the top is the same sort of thickness as the bottom. So by that I mean that this is actually just as thin or as thick as it is at the bottom here without pushing my tool through it. Alright, so we'll grab another one here. I'm just going to again roll it around, keeping my hand cupped up. I'm just going to dip that into the cornstarch as well, because it's just starting to stick. Keep rolling around until you're happy. So I'm going to do all of these. Okay, so that is the last one now done, and it is time to move on to the outer shell. For the outer shell, I have some brown soap dough, and I've actually got a fair bit of it here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a bit of cornstarch on my hands just so it doesn't stick. I'm going to just roll myself a little bit of a sausage shape, and then I have my rolling pin, and I'm going to roll this out into a nice flat sheet. And I think I need a bit of cornstarch on here as well. And let's start that again. Now I am actually using the guides on my rolling pin. That's what these things are on here, and that will give me a nice thickness for the outer shell that's going to go on here. So just get that all nicely rolled out. So it's probably about 2 to 3 mils thick maybe. And what I'm going to do is just lift that up with my knife. I'm not going to be too worried that the underneath of this is going to be very rough looking, because the husks of coconut shells are pretty rough anyway. So let's get a piece. So all I'm going to do is cut a piece off of here. Right, so I've got my piece here, and now what I'm going to do is just grab one of my halves here, and I am going to just start to gently wrap this brown around that white shell. Now don't be too worried if you start to distort the shape of your white, because you can quite easily put that back into the shape of that half coconut. Now I have tried this where I actually roll the white out and then put the white down flat, but I just could not get that sort of round shape. I really needed to start my half coconuts off rounded to be able to get that really nice shape. So now all I'm doing is I'm actually just making sure that this is nicely stuck. And then what I'm going to do is I have a pair of scissors here, and I found it easier to do this with scissors than I did with a knife. And I'm just going to trim off all this excess brown. And again, don't be too particular about getting it all really well and closely trimmed, because when you crack those coconuts you end up with parts of the shell being higher than the flesh part, and in other parts you end up with the flesh sitting higher than the shell. So we've got that all on there. It looks like it is sticking nicely. I'm just going to grab that tool again, and I'm going to once again move it around into the palm of my hand, and this time I'm cupping my hand up just that little bit more, just to get that nice shape of the coconut. So I am pretty happy with how that one is looking, but we're not finished. What I'm going to do is wrap these other coconuts up, and then I will show you how we're going to finish these off. So just with this excess here, I'll end up rolling that back out for more of the skins later, so we'll pop that on there. Alright, I had to stop filming that one to show you because one of the delivery guys turned up and there was all sorts of noise here. So let's go for another one, and I am just going to cut another little piece off there, and we'll grab another little half coconut. Now if you are finding that this is drying out a little bit and you don't think that the two are going to stick together, I have in this little cup just a little bit of rubbing alcohol. I'm just going to brush that over the surface just to make it wet so it sticks. And then I'm going to start bringing my soap dough around that white one, just pushing on it gently to get it to actually adhere. So that one is almost done. I'm going to grab my scissors, and again we're just going to trim all that excess off there. Now I found when I was trying to trim it with the knife I was ending up distorting all of my coconuts, and I found it just easier to get a pair of scissors to trim that off. And then just once that's trimmed, I'm just going around and pushing the edges back on to make sure that it is stuck well, and I can do any extra trimming if I have got way too much overhang of the coconut shell. And all of that's just going back onto that pile, and I will roll some more of that out to do the rest of the skins on these coconuts. So that's that one. Just to get that shape back again, I'm just going to roll that round in the palm of my hand. And that looks like a really fleshy coconut this time. Oop. And there's that one. So I'm going to roll out some more of my brown, and I'm going to keep covering the outside of these coconuts. more half here to do, and there was just a couple of things I did want to actually make mention. So I have tried this quite a few different ways to make these. What I have discovered is when you actually pick this up, if you use the side which is stuck down on the board, that's actually still tacky enough to actually fold and stick around. Now I have also tried doing these where I make the ball, cut it in half, then put the brown on the back, and then try and shape them with the hole in the middle, and you end up actually really thinning out the brown, and it just does not look like a coconut at all. So even though it looks like it's a bit long-winded to do it the way I'm doing, it has been the best way that I have found to actually make these little coconuts if you want to give this a go yourself. The other advantage with actually cutting this with scissors is if you ever cracked a coconut, you'll know that it actually cuts with quite clean, straight, jagged lines, whereas if you use a knife, you'll possibly end up with quite rounded lines instead of that really nice jagged look that you get when you actually crack coconuts open. So this is the last one that I am up to here, so we'll get that one all done. I still have quite a few to make, but these are not yet finished, so I've got one more thing to do to make these start to look a bit more like a coconut. So I'll just clear some of this mess out the way, and then we'll come back and do the next bit. Right, so for the next bit of this, I'm just going to grab my coconut, and I have myself a little skewer here, and all I'm going to do now is just start working from the center, and I'm just going to put lots of little drag lines, because usually that coconut husk starts from the center and then it kind of works out and down. So once I've started that sort of circular pattern, I'm just going to keep going all the way down and around and really rough up the edge of the outside of this coconut shell, just to make it look like it has a husk on it. So I'll keep going, and once we get all this completely done, there's just 2 other things to finish it off. You come right down to the edges of the coconut shell, just so it doesn't look like you kind of stopped, because that husk will come all the way to the edges on a normal coconut. Now what I'm going to do is, on the opposite end to this tool with the big one, I've got a slightly smaller ball, and I'm just going to put in 3 little holes. Well, they're not holes, I'm just going to put in 3 little indents, because quite often when you look at coconuts, you have those 3 sort of indents on there. And then in my little puffer spray thing here, I have got some bronze sparkle or bronze sparks mica, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of dust, and there we have it. That is our little coconut, all finished and done, and I'm going to leave that to one side just to dry off, and then I'm going to do the same to all of these other coconuts. So on to the next coconut. So again, I've got my little skewer here. I'm just making sure that I do go round and clean off the tip of the skewer every so often. If you don't, as you're going through it, it will leave little bits of fluffy soap sticking off the edge of all your drag marks. But eventually all the stuff that's building up on the top of your skewer will actually leave more gouges than little sort of scratches across the surface. So always, just every so often, just wipe the tip of the skewer off so that you don't get gouges in there rather than little scratch marks on the surface. I have 17 of these little coconuts to make, so I'm going to turn my music on and sit here and create the rest of them, and then I will get to making the soap. So I hope you have enjoyed watching how I make these little coconuts for Saturday's soap. If you did, why not leave me a thumbs up and any comments down below, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can with any questions that you may have. If you are new around here, why not subscribe to the channel, and if you hit that little bell sign, it will let you know when I bring out Saturday's video. So thank you so much for watching, and until Saturday, I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you then. Bye.